There you
Yeah. Thanks, Ben.
All right. So, boom.
All right, excellent. Yeah, so as Ben mentioned, I am here sort of wearing a lot of different hats today. I'm on the cooperative extension side of things. I'm on the rec management policy department side of things. And also today, I'm kind of leaning more heavily into my role with the Travel and Tourism Research Association because I'm going to be sharing a lot of data and research findings from a lot of different sources that pertain to travel outlooks and what we've learned from the last couple of years. Next slide, please. So a quick glimpse at what's been going on at UNH. For those of you who don't know, we actually have tourism-related course offerings at three different colleges. So students can learn about tourism from lenses of natural resources, health and human services, and business and hospitality. As Ben mentioned, I'm affiliated with the Recreation Management and Policy Department, and I know we have others on the call who are associated with that program as well. We are excited to have actually a joint tourism management minor that was just launched, and this is in collaboration with the other colleges. So students from a lot of different backgrounds can study tourism as well. And also we are launching a ski resort management cognate, so focus area, which doesn't relate so much to the Seacoast region as some other parts of New Hampshire, but is still a great offering. And one thing we always want to highlight when we're speaking to audiences such as yourselves are that our students are always looking for internship opportunities in addition to jobs once they graduate. So there's a lot of ways to engage with students at UNH. Next slide, please. On the cooperative extension side of things, some of you may be more familiar with extension than others. My colleague Shannon Rogers actually presented at this event last year, and she shared some of her work related to downtowns and trails. We actually have extension offices in every county in the state. I think my colleague Nate Burnett's may be on the call as well, and he really works in the Seacoast area most specifically. And we represent a lot of different program areas. I'm on the community and economic development team, but I get to work across our different areas. And that's especially true when it comes to tourism, because tourism is very interdisciplinary and it has a lot of connections to different themes. So we offer education and 4-H youth development, food and agriculture, health and well-being, and a lot of different areas of natural resources as well. Next slide. Then on the TTRA side of things, who are we? Internationally, the parent organization has over 1,000 members, which include destination marketing organizations, state tourism offices, people on the academic side like myself, and many more. Our NETRA Northeast chapter has around 130 members, and we really like to come together to talk about New England or Northeastern specific types of considerations, with all of these goals of advocating for higher travel and tourism related research, analysis, and marketing standards, and to be a source for evidence-based global travel and tourism data and analysis. Next slide. So today, what I hope to do with you all is to consider some key questions here. First, what did we learn from 2025? It was an interesting year for travel and tourism. What does all of this knowledge learned mean going forward? And what does it mean for New Hampshire specifically and for your region specifically? And then what can we all of us in this virtual room today, do to help fortify our local tourism economy? Next slide. So as you probably have all observed, travel and tourism has been in the news a lot in the past year, and not always in a very positive light. But there, in the United States and beyond, there's been a lot going on politically, geopolitically, that has influenced people's travel decisions. And there are some numbers I'd like to share on that. Next slide. So we do have some data, this is from Tourism Economics, on inbound travel, what it was looking like this past year. So looking at summer season, which is usually a really big one for us in New Hampshire, international inbound air bookings to the United States ended up being down about 10 to 14% for what was booked for August to October compared to the prior year. But that really stood out in terms of Canadian visitation. And that was a big topic earlier during this seminar as well. Canadian land arrivals, so people driving across the border, dropped 37% in July from the prior year. So really big impacts to a lot of tourism businesses in our region since we are a border state. And, kind of the bummer thing is that forecasts had been pretty positive. There had been a 9% increase in overall arrivals predicted, but then that ended up looking more like an 8.2% decline. So a big shift there in expectations. What did this mean in terms of economics? Well, there's some different figures floating around out there depending upon what is calculated into the equation. But Tourism Economics had estimated that inbound visitor spending in the United States dropped by about $8.3 billion across the nation. So really big impacts when you put it all together. Next slide. So looking at 2026, some rebounding is expected, and that's largely thanks to soccer or football, depending on what country you're from, and the fact that FIFA will be in multiple cities across North America, including Boston. So we might get some trickling out benefits from visitors coming to the greater Boston region. But still, it seems that the sort of word of the day is uncertainty, and much is sort of still to be determined. Next slide. There may be a silver lining in some of this because people still want to travel and they still want to have tourism experiences. So they may be shifting their interest from planning international trips to planning more local trips, or at least staying in their own country, which for us in the United States means we have a lot of potential audiences to pull from. So 43% of American international travelers said they traveled abroad less in 2025 compared to 2024. And this was most pronounced with Gen Xers and baby boomers. The reasons cited for this shift were personal reasons, which can include political concerns or safety concerns, economic uncertainty, and rising travel costs. So there is this sort of economic backdrop going on right now as well, in which uncertainty comes up as a key word also. Next slide. Thing to keep in mind, though, is the general trend for many years now, if we can overlook that pandemic, we dare not speak its name, has been for growth of people wanting to travel around the world, 3%, 4% type growth year after year, which really adds up. And we were kind of getting back to that trajectory post-COVID to have more like a 4% growth. So, again, people want to travel. There's a lot of growing interest around the world for people to get out, have international trips, and explore the world. But there's a lot of other factors that can interfere. Next slide. So what is making people choose certain destinations? We know that there's interest in travel, but we also know that there's some things that might be getting in the way. This is data from 2023, keep in mind, but still pretty recent. And I think it really stands out that above all factors, it's the experiences of friends and relatives that influence decisions. So it's that word of mouth. It's the hearing good stories from people that you trust and who you may know kind of have similar interests or values as yourself. That's going to be hugely influential, much more than even advertising or proximity to a destination or special offers and deals, although those are certainly important as well. Next slide. And I think what really stands out here is this idea that family, or quote unquote family, really matters. And I think this was something we really saw in our region this past year when there were things like political concerns that were interfering with sort of normal travel plans. The visitors that kind of consider their destination community to be their extended family, they're still going to want to come quite likely. They hold, they understand who you are. They can sort of see past the news stories and still want to continue with those traditions that they have to visit a place. But people who are less committed or who are just as fine going somewhere else might choose an alternative instead. And I'm thinking about one example. I know Janelle Lawton also works a lot with the owner of Highland Mountain Bike Park, Mark Hayes. And I've had some conversations with him and their staff this past year about what their visitation was looking like, because they typically have a lot of Canadian visitors. And it was interesting because in the springtime, when the mountain first opened, that's when you have kind of like the diehard enthusiasts coming in. And they were actually sort of pleasantly pleased that that they were still getting a lot of Canadians coming in for that. But then you go back to the last slide. Yeah. Coming in for that. But when it got to be the peak summer season, that's when they started to see those big drops in Canadian visitation numbers that ended up being several thousands of visitors that they were short compared to prior years. So again, if it's the people that are like your close-knit circle, yes, they're visitors, but they really are kind of that family. They're still probably going to come, but it's those that aren't so connected yet that might choose to do something else. So thinking about who we are here today as a group, I know many of you represent different tourism-related businesses or business associations. What can we do to kind of harness that notion? And I think the more we can try to turn people from being clients into our community or into our extended family, that's going to help keep people's interest and let them sort of see beyond all of these other factors that might be interfering with their likelihood to come back again next season. So one strategy might be, like, let's say if you're an inn or a campground, maybe there's a monthly advertising email you tend to send out. Is there a way to restructure that so it's more like a newsletter than just an advertising flyer? Maybe you include news about your business upgrades. Maybe you introduce your new staff members and tell a little bit about their story. Again, building that sense of family and connection. And maybe you share stories of some of your clients, some of the families that have visited for many years, and what it is that keeps them coming back generation after generation. Next slide. And connected to that is this idea of local traditions. We have so many really cool events in New Hampshire that happen year after year, community festivals, arts and culture type of events, sports events. And the more that we can build this idea with visitors that our local traditions are also their annual traditions, that's going to be an important tool for getting people to come back again and again, even if there are reasons they might be a little bit hesitant. So make them feel included in the local heritage. Make them feel proud of it too, as being a part of that experience and that tradition. And keeping in mind that travel and tourism are often really key ways that families create multi-generational traditions. It might be that family members are really only coming together once a year to take that trip to Hampton Beach, say. And if that gets interrupted, that's a whole family tradition that's, kind of falling apart. It might be they're really depending upon that week every summer. So that's an important notion to keep in mind as well, the importance of family traditions. Next slide. I think we do have some New Hampshire advantages, as we've been told before. In thinking about the political context that we're in right now, we do hear stories about some travelers not wanting to go to certain places because of feeling like it's not the right political culture for them, or feeling that there might be safety considerations for them. New Hampshire, for the most part, is kind of known as a purple state, an in-between state. We have a little bit of everything. And that can be something that we can use to sort of help maintain that image that, we welcome all different types of people. We're not too much one thing or another. Also, we have a very long-standing relationship with the Boston metropolitan area. We're really the northern playground for a lot of Massachusetts. And that's it. I feel it a lot. I live in Laconia, and the difference between this time of year and July, pretty much every license plate around me in the summer is from Massachusetts. So certain communities really feel that a lot. But at the same time, we have a lot of other major metropolitan areas that are within a relatively easy drive time of New Hampshire. And there could be ways to, make better efforts to reach out to those cities as well, and not sort of rest upon our laurels of Massachusetts and Boston too much. So we're well positioned to reach new audiences and keep a lot of different folks interested in what we have to offer, which is really a lot because we're a small state, but we've got mountains and lakes and ocean. We've got farms and agricultural heritage, so much history. We've got a lot to share within a compact package. Also, this last one is not based on research or data, my own subjectivities, I think, but we have amazing people in New Hampshire. It's one of our best amenities, I think. We've got great senses of humor. We're creative. We've got this tradition of arts and crafts. And I think we're hard workers. And those are all things that will make a difference if times get a little bit tough for tourism. Next slide. But on the flip side of that, do people actually know about New Hampshire? We've got so much to offer, as depicted in this beautiful painting here. I lived out west for many years. I spent about 2 decades in different Western states, working a lot of tourism and hospitality jobs. And I always found it so interesting that a lot of people, when I tell them I was from New Hampshire, they would say, huh, what's that like? Which is kind of a cool opportunity to start fresh without so many preconceived notions. But I would hear that all the time. And I think so many people really know about Maine and Vermont and Massachusetts. And New Hampshire is sort of this black hole in the middle without quite so much knowledge. And I think that's an exciting opportunity, right? One thing I sometimes would tell people is, okay, so you know about Maine, you've been to Vermont, you've been to Boston. We've kind of got all of that, but in one state. You can get lobster here, you can get maple syrup here, you can go skiing, you can visit some really cool like historical trails and sites. We've got a lot of that. So, realizing that some people really like to travel off the beaten path and like to kind of feel like they're the first of their friends to discover something, that can be a benefit for us when people don't know a lot about us. And I think that sense of discovery can really be a special thing for getting people to visit New Hampshire who haven't in the past. Next slide. So if we're going to reach more people, if that's our goal, we want to bring more domestic travelers here if we're down on Canadian visitors or, whatever our reasoning is. It's important to know what visitors like to do. So what's on American travelers' minds right now? And from the State of the American Traveler study that Future Partners did for 2025, some key interests stood out. Food and cuisine, not too surprising that a lot of travelers are interested in that. Visiting historical sites and attractions. I was actually kind of surprised to see that about 50% of respondents said that was a high or extremely high interest. But it kind of makes sense when you think about the sort of typical things that people include on their itineraries when they're going to explore a new place. It often is pertaining to history. So like, wow, Seacoast region, Portsmouth, so much to offer in that department. Such a unique feel when you're walking around downtown Portsmouth, and just a really special kind of thing to be able to offer visitors. There's still, about half of people who a priority is to travel internationally. But on the flip side, that means that a whole half of people say they don't really care about traveling internationally. So that can be potentially, a glass half full sort of thing when we think about the potential of reaching more domestic markets in the United States. So then some other activities I sort of pulled out. This, if you're interested, this report that they've produced has so many different categories, and it's really interesting to look through. But some that I thought were really interesting or pertain specifically to the New Hampshire context are fitness, health, and wellness. So that might mean going to a spa or participating in a yoga class while on a trip. Almost 30%. So that's something that I think a lot of different communities, whether you're a big city or a smaller town, there can be some way to offer that to visitors. Hiking is a big one. Great news for New Hampshire. And that doesn't have to be hiking up a big mountain. That can be, also exploring a rail trail or some local nature paths with your family. Crafting DIY and creative projects came up on this. And this I thought was an interesting one that people said they want to participate in while traveling. And maybe for some, that means bringing along their knitting while they're sitting on a train or something like that. But I think this also indicates that there's an interest in engaging in hands-on ways with whatever sort of that artistic tradition is in an area. And I think there's a lot of ways that our shops and galleries and craftspeople in New Hampshire can maybe, create some interesting partnerships in the tourism space. Lastly, agritourism, which is a interest area of mine for sure. I've been engaged with a few different agritourism projects. Has about 1/5 of visitors interested, so that can be a great thing to keep in mind also. Next slide, please. So if we're thinking about what people like to do, how do we get sort of the specific info of like what people are feeling when they're in New Hampshire or when they go to your business specifically? And I think I'm here to sort of say a word of warning about anecdotal data, but also sort of encourage you to explore anecdotal data some. And that can be just the stories you hear from people, the responses on comment cards, things that people are saying on social media or on TripAdvisor or something like that. It's you get a lot of outliers in there, skewed sort of impressions, but I think they can be helpful in creating these vignettes about different types of like how people experience places differently, and the different perspectives people are coming from. And an important tool just to get out of our own brains sometimes and think about what a visitor experience or a certain product might be like for somebody who's different than yourself. So next slide. So one way to do that, of course, is through social media. And I think, keeping your eyes on different groups or subreddits or whatever it might be on social media can be an important way to kind of get that temperature reading of different opinions people are having about a certain topic. But at the same time, there's so many caveats there, right? We often hear people say things like, oh, it's just the most angry people that are speaking up on Facebook, or the people who are bored and have too much time, or just people who like to be loud and have their voices be heard. And there's a lot of questions now about, how representative is what you're hearing about the overall, is it representative of the overall population or not? A lot of concerns about whether it's actually not even humans, but it's bots or other AI tools that advertisers are using to put in certain perspectives or maybe get people to turn against a competitor or something like that. And while I'm not going to go too deep into AI world today, it's a big topic, it's an important one. I'm not really the best person to do that. And I think we've had so many other seminars on AI that I think for me, it's kind of refreshing to talk about something that's not just AI for a moment, because the rest of travel and tourism is still happening, right? Even if AI is happening also. But it's super important to sort of know what types of data we're working with and what sort of forces are out there right now. So next slide. The good news is there is a lot of information about like user groups of different social media sources. And I wanted to just take a moment to share this from Pew Research Center. This is 2025 data, breaking down typical users of different social media platforms. I wish there was a column here that was like, how many are thought to be bots and not real people? But this gives us a sense of at least how the users are identifying. And it's probably not too surprising to see that, users skew younger or older for certain things. YouTube sees a lot of usage across different age groups. Instagram sees higher usage in that younger category than older. But there's some good data out there to explore. Next slide. This past year, I had never really been much of a Redditor before, but I've gotten pretty into Reddit lately. And there's some good subreddits for different New Hampshire topics. And I use it kind of to keep like a pulse on what people are talking about. And again, it's not perfectly representative, but I do think that can be helpful for businesses and organizations. And if you're going to do that, or if you're going to use social media as an outreach tool or an advertising tool, definitely good to know how to tailor your messaging or how to interpret what you're seeing based on who tends to use it. So again, YouTube, like everybody is engaging with YouTube at least a little bit, nearly everybody. But when you get into some of the other categories, it can change quite a bit. So Reddit, for instance, tends to skew a little bit on the more highly educated side of things and higher income levels than some of the other platforms. I could spend a lot of time going through all this, but I won't for the sake of time. But I encourage you all to check out Pew's research if you want to learn more about some of these breakdowns. Next slide. And sort of the reason I am throwing that at you now in terms of this, like what's ahead for the future, is I think, where there is uncertainty in the tourism landscape, there might also be an opportunity for those of us who are on the ground doing the tourism work as business owners or as organizational leaders to think about whether a communications refresh would be useful. If you are trying to shift more to reaching domestic markets instead of relying on maybe the same Canadians that visited in the past years, what might you do to spark interest differently or reach different people? And I think a key thing there is tailoring messaging around, reaching people who think that they've already done it all, think they've already seen it all in your region, because I guarantee they haven't. And I know many of us, when we've had visitors come to an area, maybe friends or family come to visit from a different state, and they say like, "Oh, I really want to try this restaurant. This looks really good." And they're like, "Have you been there?" And then you might have that awkward moment of being like, "Yeah, I've been meaning to go there." We often don't get out of our similar routines until something encourages us to do so. So playing tourist can be a really great way of exploring things. And I think if we encourage people to do that, we open up new opportunities for like staycations and, getting people to travel a little bit more locally, which can be a great sustainability move as well. And I like these comments coming in, Brent. Yeah, kindness adventures. I love that. Very cool. Thank you. Next slide. So the great thing, and actually, Brent, your comment is perfect, thinking about like community impacts, because we hear a lot of stories from places like Barcelona or Venice where there are too many tourists and there aren't enough places for locals to live. And we see some of that. We've heard about housing challenges today in Portsmouth. We see some of that in New Hampshire as well. And there's definitely places that feel like they have too many tourists, other places that would like to have more. But it is interesting to see that there seems to be a trend towards more residents in tourism towns, and this is across the United States, showing some acceptance or appreciation for tourism as an industry. So respondents to the statement, overall, I think that tourism is good for my local area. Only 57% responded positively to that statement in 2020, but this past year that went up to 65%. And of course, COVID was a big thing that happened in between there, where some communities suddenly were like, wow, this is what happens when we don't have tourism. We're in trouble. And then other places, especially those with a lot of outdoor recreation amenities, were like, yikes, suddenly our trailheads are packed. We're not ready for this. Like the porta potties can't keep up. We start to see a lot of different ways that issues can arise. Next slide. Also interesting along the lines of like what residents know about tourism or how much they want to be engaged with tourism, even if it's not their own industry. This was a study on just residents who live in towns with tourism. They don't have to be people that work in the industry. But 47% consider themselves informed or up to date about tourism news in their community. I think that's actually fairly good, but opportunity certainly to get that number even higher. And 68% feel that tourists to their area should be educated about how to travel responsibly and care for natural areas. So a shout out to Janelle again and the Division of Travel and Tourism Development team. Their Wildly Responsible program is a great way for New Hampshire to address this. And I think it's great that so many residents do prioritize that. But again, 68% could be even higher. So there's opportunity there. Next slide. So I want to touch on another big topic that we seem to not be able to escape in any conversation. Can you guess what it is? Next slide. Workforce development. And I wanted to touch on this during this presentation because it's another one of those areas that all of us here in attendance can potentially actually do some things to make a difference. Because we face some challenges in New Hampshire with an older median population compared to most states, issues and concerns around youth not sticking around after graduation. And there's some interesting data here. So Longwoods looked into perceptions of tourism jobs. And they found that for the statement, most jobs in the tourism industry are low paying and seasonal. A lot of people agree with that. And that's been a challenging thing in terms of trying to get people excited about tourism careers, is that a lot of it's the hourly or seasonal jobs. And there's not a perception that these can be really successful career paths for people or paths with a lot of career growth potential. So next slide. For the question of the tourism industry offers rewarding careers, we see somewhat better numbers here, and some difference between generations also. But the youngest folks, Gen Z, they're not feeling quite as positively overall as some of the older generations, 42% Gen Z compared to 58% of baby boomers. So that also shows that maybe there's more we can do to engage students in tourism opportunities. You can get them seeing things a little bit differently. Next slide. So really what this comes down to is seeing different ways that we can engage with young people. And I think one really cool thing about travel and tourism as an industry or a sector compared to all of the other possible careers that exist in New Hampshire is that many first jobs, many summer jobs that teens have are related to tourism, right? Because that's where a lot of the sort of seasonal opportunities come up. So there's a real opportunity there to capture people's interests, let them see that these can be fun jobs that can offer a lot. Also, I think it's really cool that with a lot of tourism jobs, you kind of get exposed to a lot of other related jobs as well. Like, for instance, if you work at a hotel, you might be at the front desk, but you might be getting some insight into how food and beverage and catering work, how like weddings and special events are managed, how like tour buses work, all of this different stuff. So a lot of ways for youth to kind of explore different trajectories there. Next slide. And, I think part of the task then upon all of us is to show that there's value that goes just beyond the paycheck. obviously paychecks are important, making sure that people who work in this industry can, make a sustainable amount of money. But there is so much transferable skill development that can come from tourism and hospitality jobs. And I think there's just a lot of opportunity for those of us that already work in these industries, related industries, to take it upon us to be good mentors, to show youth and other early career participants that take them under your wing to show, if you're working on a budget or something, even if that's not their job, pull them aside to give them a glimpse into that as well. Include them in decision making and special projects. Introduce them to broader professional networks. Events such as this one are great for that, and really show how tourism industry, it's a lot of fun people and a lot of great things that you get to do. Next slide. So with all of this in mind, what are some, key silver linings and opportunities that exist right now? Give that a click. Thank you. So one thing I'd like to say is that, we keep hearing this word uncertainty, but can we kind of reframe that mainly, or a little bit at least, to be this idea of flexibility? If we're not sure where things are headed, does that give us maybe some sort of freedom to try new things when it comes to marketing or special events or promotions to local people to get them engaged? Hopefully there's some, opportunity there that if you're not just on the same track you've always been on, there's some flexibility to try new things. Next bullet. And again, if we're seeing a drop in international arrivals, maybe there is space to reach more domestic visitors and try to include messaging and opportunities and experiences that will really speak to them particularly. We are hearing about a lot of economic concerns. People aren't sure how much they should be spending across this next year on travel and tourism. And that's certainly an area where if one door closes, another door opens, because there are so many amazing experiences visitors can have in New Hampshire on a pretty low budget. I'm thinking about some of the agritourism kind of activities out there, a lot of our outdoor recreation, the fact that you can be immersed in some amazing historical sites and art exhibits for free or very little cost. If people aren't spending as much money on, big package deals or staying at resorts or, the family ski vacation, they might be looking at other opportunities to come together as a family on a lower price tag. And we certainly have so much to offer in that regard. Next bullet. And, we can't avoid the fact that these are interesting times politically, and we're dealing with social divisions, political divisions, not just the United States, but other countries as well. And for me, what this really means is, our industry, travel and tourism, hospitality, are as important now as ever, because these have traditionally been spaces where people come together to learn about people from different cultures and backgrounds, interact with people who they wouldn't normally interact with, and really create spaces for people to have fun, to get away from the challenges of their everyday life for a little bit maybe, and to foster just more senses of curiosity and understanding. So I could wave a flag all day for the importance of tourism and travel experiences. And I really feel like we're in a moment now in which these things do really matter. So for more information about, if you want to contact me, if you're interested in these slides, I'm happy to share them. Also have links here to Travel and Tourism Research Association. They've got some webinars from some of these research groups that I've shared data from today that are available on YouTube. Links to UNH Extension and the Rec Management and Policy pages as well, if you'd like to learn more about those programs and offerings. So thanks. I don't know if we have time for questions or what. I see a couple different comments coming in.
Yeah, we have just a couple minutes here. There was one question about the 250th anniversary and what impacts that may have for international travel and tourism here in New Hampshire, particularly for our historic sites.
Yeah, I'm wondering. That's a great question, right? I think that anytime that there's something that brings attention to history just as a notion, like people are going to start tuning in more to things that have to do with historical sites and things, especially if they're some of our older historical sites here that do pertain to like the colonial era. Certainly there's such a thematic connection and reason to revisit those. But I think sometimes visitors just need like reminders that certain assets are important. So I'm personally hopeful that that campaign, this big event that's happening, really, this milestone in history, can spark interest in history more generally. But I'd love other insights on that as well. Some of you come from, I think, historical sites and organizations here, and you might have some thoughts on that.
Any comments from anyone on that? From our historic site friends? All right. Another question in the
Hey,
chat.
Ben.
Yeah.
Ben, sorry, I can't get my virtual hand up quick enough.
Okay.
I'll just go back to the work we did around the eclipse, right? And how we really worked together to collaborate to say, hey, we know we're going to have a huge influx of people to specific locations to see the eclipse. And I think we can take a lot of the learnings from that and apply it to the historical piece of what's going to happen around the 250th, right? And know that people will be going to these locations, and we need to be working closely with, our local governance and police and safety officials to make sure that, we have good access and people are safe.
Yeah. Thanks, Janelle. Another question from Andy from the Gundalo is about your slide said travel is expected to be up 3%. Last year was down 8%. Politics and pricing seems to be, the same. What's going to drive the growth?
That's a great question. And I from the data source that I was looking at for that, a lot of that growth was attributed to the FIFA World Cup specifically, and just the massive forces that like very large sport events can cause in areas. But there might be some other forces, like, to some extent, people sort of might be accepting things as a new normal and sort of willing to get back to some of their plans or routines and figures, or like, how long can I wait? I think we did see some of that during COVID too. And of course, that's a different type of thing. But when you're told, like, maybe you shouldn't travel, if you're feeling hesitant at a certain point, you start getting antsy, right? And think like, well, maybe now is as good a time as ever. But I think the thing that I've heard from colleagues that are really crunching these numbers now is that it's still largely a guessing game. There's a lot of research that's taking in visitor sentiments and trying to factor in, spending forecasts, but uncertainty is staying one of the big words that is floating around a lot.
Yeah, I'm on some committees with chambers from the Foxborough region of Mass, and they are super excited about the World Cup and all the sort of chaos that might come with it, and positive stuff. So I think Jen Stevens had an arts question she wanted.
Yeah, I have a quick question. You had a slide that showed percentage of people who go on vacations or are tourists because of certain reasons. And unless people think crafting is an art, which it could be, I don't see like live music or theater or anything registering at all. And I'm wondering if it's because of the way the question is posed in whatever poll is put out. Maybe people think, oh, crafting. But I would wonder about these. We have some great live music venues, and maybe they don't come here just because of it, but I bet it should register. And I would love to see these polls that Pew or
yeah, well, that's a great question. And those categories are included.
Well,
in this.
it's pretty sad
I just pulled out certain
makes
ones that had caught my eye as kind of unexpected or that I hadn't really thought about before. But I encourage you to go to that data source because you can get the whole long list. And there are many more categories that I wasn't able to include here just
well,
for
I wonder like the order
time.
they come in too. Like I wonder if crafting is below theater or whatever. I don't know. Yeah, I'll
think
definitely
it is. Live
go
music
check it
tends
out.
to be a big one.
Well, I guess it's not in our area or
No, I think what she's saying
was,
that she just picked a few to share. That wasn't.
I'd like to see. Yeah, I'll look for New Hampshire then.
So
interesting.
Yeah, I'd be happy to share that report with you. Send the link.
Thank you. Well, I'll look at the URL too. Thanks.
Great. Well, thank you so much for that. That was super educational, and I learned a lot, and hopefully others did as well. So we really appreciate you taking time to share with us, and give us that kind of great overview of what we can do here locally to tell our story in a different way. And I think we
It
have a lot
really
to
was
offer.
good. Yeah,
I think
I
we have
loved
a
it.
lot to offer as community celebrations. We do like a good party here. Just look at the Halloween parade or vintage Christmas celebrations or anything like that. We have some great stories to tell, and we probably need to spend a little energy on doing some more storytelling this year. Um, so thank you so much. We have all these slide decks. We can share them out with everyone that registered, and we'll work on that here later today or tomorrow and get that going. But just want to thank everybody for taking time out of your day to be with us today, rolling with it a little bit as we transition to the Zoom format. Really appreciate all our speakers and everyone to share. I am very optimistic. We are for the coming season, and maybe that's just the optimist in me, but I refuse to be pessimistic. So the option is only to be optimistic. So just reach out to the team. We have an amazing staff here at the chamber that is super responsive. If you have a question, if you have an idea, no matter how crazy, we'd love to hear it because sometimes that sparks a whole process that turns into something magical. So reach out to us. We're super accessible, and we look forward to continuing our partnership with all of you all throughout the coming season. So thanks again for being here. We'll share the recordings, we'll share the slides, and we'll be in touch. Thanks again.
Thank you all so much.